because it is contrast that gives us perspective. I am tired today. I am exhausted. I am in a state of numbness and survival mode, and that is okay. I am sharing this because I deeply want you to understand that being in joy 24/7 is a process. It is a reason I've created a container for myself so that I can look back and see the crash points, so that I can see where it is that my body has its limits, so that I can show you that I'm not walking around in la la land 24/7, smiling and laughing and all of this like ungrounded bubble reality, whatever. My words aren't wording today. I keep getting woken up at 5:30 a.m. by a puppy, and Mercury retrograde starts in 2 days. And being a Gemini rising and Virgo moon, both signs being ruled by Mercury, Mercury does tend to hit me pretty hard. So please forgive me if my word is just like blah blah, right? But what I'm trying to say is that this is real life. This isn't some spiritual woo-woo hippie up in the clouds, turning away from reality, avoiding all emotions, ignoring the signs and pushing myself to my limits without caring for my physical form. This for me is a very grounded and embodied challenge. It is a culmination of everything that I've been learning about myself and consciousness and the state of the world, and beginning to try and integrate it into something that I can build into not just a mental philosophy, but into a practical, real world embodiment. And for me, this is the point of the spiritual path. It's not to lose myself in books and texts or continue to listen to podcast after audiobook about other people's ideas and perspectives. It's about taking everything that I have learned and invested in and shifted around and bringing it into my daily life, which is why 30 Days of Joy has been so profound for me, because it's 30 days of joy, but it's also 30 days of being human, right? But of trying to be the best embodied version of myself and seeing what happens. And after I filmed yesterday's vlog, I sat in meditation, and a couple of things happened whilst I was deep in meditation. First of all, a rather large wound came to the surface and triggered an almost panic attack. And the reason I say almost is because I'll describe it to you. So I was sitting in meditation, and suddenly all of these thoughts and fears came up around money, as they do. And I felt, because I was consciously aware, even though my mind was running, I could feel this panic rising within me, and I could feel the spaces inside of my body that were beginning to contract and clench and tense up. And I felt that my breathing was getting shallower, and I just breathed. I took deep breaths, like filling up my lungs. And then I held my breath at the top, and I pushed oxygen into the places inside of me that were contracting. I went deep into the contraction. I allowed myself to feel the full pulling, painful, all of itness of this wound, of this contraction, of this energy. Because that's all emotions are, energy and motion. And when you remove the story, and it's not easy, because the mind is loud and the mind is strong and the mind is a supercomputer and the mind is convincing and the mind is trying to protect you and keep you alive and keep you surviving, right? Survival of the species, survival of your individual being. So it will do everything it can to protect you. And sometimes that means creating stories, spinning fables, all of it. And once you are able to hear those stories and understand that that's all they are, a story, it's not truth, it's not subjective nor objective truth, it's just your mind. And so when I was breathing into these contracted spaces within me and I was feeling this panic rise, it's like a moment of clarity came through where I said, I can either listen to my mind, or in this moment at peak mental panic, before I bubble over and spill over and freak out and panic and do something impulsive, I can choose my heart. I can choose to listen to my heart, because right now my mind's voice is louder, but it doesn't mean that my heart's voice has gone away. And so in that moment of panic, understanding this moment of, I don't know, clarity, or it was, I can't really explain it. It was like a choice was presented to me. And the choice said, you can either listen to your head or you can tap into your heart right now. The choice is entirely up to you. And neither choice is wrong. And so I continued to breathe, and I visualized a light in my mind, and I visualized pushing and pulling and bringing that light down into my heart space. And I continued to breathe, and I continued to be in my heart, and I felt the panic beginning to dissipate. The more that I breathed into my contractions, the more that they expanded. Another thing that I said, and I tend to do in moments like this, is when something like that arises, an energy, if you can name that energy without the story, if you forget the story about why you're feeling that energy, if you can name that energy and you can say, energy, it's okay to feel you in my body. It's okay for you to pass through my body. You're welcome here. Then honestly, I've done this so many times with so many different energies, and the moment that you voice them, acknowledge them, speak to it, embrace that energy, allow it inside of your body instead of trying to resist or get rid of, because remember, what you resist persists. The moment you stop trying to get rid of an energy, it's the moment it disappears. It's such this, like, it's an irony in a way. Can't think of the proper word. But this energy within me was that of fear. Fear of quitting my job, of not having enough money, of being in debt, of just fear of, like, what happens in a society that revolves around money when you have none. The fear around the leap of faith that I'm taking in deciding to leave the UK in April and not knowing what's going to happen once I do. Fear. Fear is what was rising within me. Fear was the energy that wanted to move through me. And instead of resisting that fear, I spoke from the voice in my heart and I said, fear, you are welcome. It is okay to feel you. It makes sense to feel you. Of course it makes sense to feel fear in this moment when I'm taking such a huge risk. Of course. Doing the head, Indian head thing. Of course. I've been watching too much CACAO. But I said, fear, you're welcome in my body. And I just, it wasn't an instant process, but by the end of the process, by the end of the time that I had brought myself into my heart, that I had spoken to fear, named it, welcomed it, invited it through, I sat there and I felt such a peace within my body. It was like my body felt 2 stone lighter. I could have floated off that bed, and yet I was still grounded, still sitting cross-legged. I hadn't dissociated from my body. I was still here. But I had mental clarity, and I had physical and emotional peace. And if this isn't the power of inner work, like, this challenge is a culmination of my inner work. And you watching this may not be your path. This may not be the work that you want to do. Joy may not be the frequency that you aspire for. But inner work can take someone who is so depleted. This was me yesterday. Depleted, exhausted, survival mode, numb, tired. In that state, fear rose within me, almost causing such a panic. But because of the intensive work that I have done within, I was able to not panic. I was able to understand that what was happening, it's like I was outside of myself watching it happen. I was able to understand what was happening to me and make a choice. Because like I said and have said throughout this entire challenge, we have no free will other than the free will of how to respond. And in that moment, whether that moment itself was a predestined event, which I believe it was, I don't believe in any coincidences. I don't believe in chance happenings. I don't believe that anything isn't divinely planned out. I am just a chess piece being moved on the chessboard. But my free will in that moment could have been to panic. It could have been to panic hard. Could have been to cry, weep, shout, fall into despair, fall into a depressive episode, lock off the challenge, go back and tell my friend that I want to actually stay with him and work with him still. It could have led to all of these things, and yet because of the work that I've done on myself, I was able to recognize and make a conscious decision within that spiral to choose my heart, to choose to dive into my heart, to pull myself out of the mental spirals and to work with and allow myself to transmute the energy of fear, which is the densest of all energies. If joy, gratitude, love, and abundance are at the top of the scale, and I like to work with David Hawkins' scale consciousness, if they are at the top, then fear is the absolute bottom. It is the absolute bottom density, and yet that doesn't make it bad. Because the scale is the range of human experience. If we only had the top or if we only had the bottom, that would not allow us to live a full and joyful life. Because it is contrast that gives us perspective. And with that, my loves, I'm wishing you an amazing day, an amazing, joyous time, whenever, wherever you're watching this. And I will see you tomorrow for day 18. Mwah.